Hi guys, welcome back to another Deep Shot video. I haven't been, uploading for the past couple weeks, and that's because I was on vacation, so I apologize. But we are back today, and today we're going to be talking about every NBA team's all-time GOAT, or greatest of all time. So I'm going to start off with the Atlanta Hawks, and I think that this really comes down to either Dominique Wilkins or Bob Pettit. Dominique is obviously the better player, but I do think Pettit, I will give him props due to winning the Hawks' only championship in franchise history. So I'm going to go Bob Pettit for the greatest Atlanta Hawk of all time. Next up on our list, we have the Boston Celtics. And again, the Celtics conversation really comes down to two people currently, and those are Larry Bird and Bill Russell. Bill Russell is obviously the most dominant player of all time in terms of winning. So you could argue that's the case for him being the greatest Celtic of all time, as he has 10 or 11 championships. But I do think as a Celtic, Larry Bird is more popular amongst the fans, I guess. And this obviously just correlates to Bill Russell just being an older generation player. But I do still give Larry Bird props for being the greatest Celtic of all time, even though Bill Russell essentially built the Celtics franchise. I will give Larry Bird props for being just a better overall player. Next up, we have the Nets, and I'm going to go with Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd is, the Nets franchise in a whole has not been great over time, so they haven't had much success really in many of their players, but as Jason Kidd, he did lead the Nets to back-to-back finals appearances, though they never won, obviously. But I guess the other argument for this case would be Julius Erving. But if I'm not mistaken, Julius Erving had his Nets days in the ABA, and with the Sixers, it was where he played in the NBA. So for the Nets, I am going to end up going with Jason Kidd. Next up, we have the Hornets, and the Hornets have a very limited amount of players, and it really could be LaMelo Ball or Brandon Miller in a couple of years, but as it stands, it's probably Kemba Walker. So that just shows the Hornets franchise in a whole. They have maybe a couple All-Stars in their entire tenure as an NBA franchise, so I'm gonna go Kemba Walker for the Hornets. Next we got the Bulls, and this really, they don't have many great players outside of the Jordan run, with MJ obviously being the greatest Bull, and also who I said in my one of my previous videos was the greatest of all time. So I'm going MJ pretty, obviously for the Bulls. If anyone I would have to go second, it's probably Scottie Pippen, and then after that, Dennis Rodman, Derrick Rose, and then maybe even Joakim Noah, because he was really good as a passing big man, kind of like Jokic, who Jokic is today, I guess. Next we have the Cavs, and this is, again, pretty easy. It's LeBron James, and then Kyrie Irving, or maybe Mark Price, or maybe even Big Z is second, third, fourth, and fifth in that, in no exact order. By the way, something I should mention before I continue further is I'm not going to be reusing any players in between the video. So LeBron's only going to show up once in this video, same with players like Kevin Durant, who's only going to show up once, which, makes sense, but still, I just want to put that out there. And also, since I took a little bit of a break, this is a nice time to ask for you guys to please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers, and it really helped me out, so thank you. Next on our list, we have the Dallas Mavericks, and the Mavericks really have that one championship with Dirk, Jason Terry, that team, and I think Dirk is the greatest Maverick of all time. But Luka Doncic playing what he's right now, 35, 12, and 7. In the future, if he gets a nice little championship run, maybe some MVPs, I think he can really take out Dirk. It's just Dirk is a really hard hill to climb, as Dirk's finals run is, close to Mavs fans as the only championship they've ever won. So I'm going to go with Dirk for the Mavs currently. But in the future, we might be talking as Luka as the greatest Mav of all time. Next up, we have the Denver Nuggets, and I'm going to go with Jokic. I think Jokic, 2-time MVP, 1-time NBA championship, 1-time Finals MVP. is the greatest Nugget of all time. Some, I guess, honorable mentions for this might be Alex English, Carmelo Anthony, and funnily enough, some people might even put Jamal Murray in this conversation as being Jokic's right-hand man in their championship run, and also being an outstanding playoff player. So I do think overall, Nuggets' best player of all time is Nikola Jokic. But yeah. So next on our list we have the Detroit Pistons. And the Pistons have really two championships. No, not two championships. They have one championship dynasty, and then they have one, not dynasty, one like run, and they have one championship team with Rip Hamilton, Ben Wallace. And I think the Pistons really GOAT is Isaiah Thomas. He was their point guard and really the leader of that Bad Boys Pistons team, which they beat the Bulls and they beat the Bulls multiple times, beat the Lakers in the finals. And I believe he has 2 championships, and he led them to both of them. So I'm going to give Isaiah Thomas props for that one. Next up, are the Golden State Warriors, and I think this is Steph Curry pretty easily. It's cut and dry. Steph Curry revolutionized the game, top 10 player of all time, second best point guard of all time, 4 championships, finals MVP, 2 MVPs. Really, the whole, everything. He has every accolade that you would want from the player, except DPOY, but we'll let that slide. But Steph Curry is really the greatest Warrior of all time, and there are a couple of seconds. Klay Thompson, or not seconds, people who are after Steph. Wilt Chamberlain could be on this list, although he didn't win with the Warriors. No, he did win with the Warriors, but that was only one, and although he was an amazingly dominant player, I think he doesn't really come close to Steph. Another player in this conversation could be Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, who were Steph's, I guess, were always with him during his 4 championships, and KD, who had 2 finals MVPs with the Warriors. But I do think it is Steph Curry, pretty cut and dry. Next one is another cut and dry one, being the Houston Rockets, and this would have been a conversation if James Harden stayed in Houston, but as we all know, he didn't. He got fat and moved out. So this is Hakeem Olajuwon. He had Rockets' only championships in franchise history, being 2 of them, which he both won Finals MVP in 94-95. So 94 and 95. So I think it's pretty cut and dry. Hakeem Olajuwon. Next up, we have the Pacers, and this would be a conversation, I think, between Reggie Miller and Paul George. I don't think Paul George stayed there long enough to be considered the Pacers' GOAT, but I do think that Reggie Miller is the Pacers' GOAT, as he led them to multiple Eastern Conference Finals, where they eventually lost to Jordan and the Bulls, which, every other team lost to them too, so it was kind of understood. But I do think Reggie Miller is the greatest Pacer of all time. Next up, we have Chris Paul, who I believe to be the GOAT of the Los Angeles Clippers. Clippers franchise in a whole has been really bland and disappointing, really, outside of those Lob City Clippers day where Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Chris Paul, which is where Chris Paul comes from, really led that team to whatever they did. Although they were very disappointing, as they never even made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, I believe. Well, maybe one year they did, but they were an electrifying offense that, never won anything. But, with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Russ, and James Harden, currently the Clippers could make a deep playoff run. And if they win a championship, Kawhi Leonard might take Chris Paul's spot, in the near future, but he still have to do a little bit more after that, I believe. But, so as it currently stands, Chris Paul is the greatest Clipper, in my opinion. Next up, we have the most illustrious NBA franchise, other than the Celtics, being the Los Angeles Lakers, who really had a plethora of talent. Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, LeBron James, Shaquille O'Neal. Really, all NBA greats go to Los Angeles. Not the Clippers. Go away. But the Lakers, I think, conversation really comes down to 2 players, that being Kobe Bryant and Magic Johnson. And I think Kobe Bryant is the greatest Laker of all time, strictly due to his reach of multiple generations of fans, multiple generations of people he's inspired, and really about his aura or something like that, where he's really transcended the Lakers in the whole, and he is the face of the Lakers franchise as it stands. So for the Lakers, I'm gonna have to go Kobe Bryant, although this is a pretty close race between him and Magic Johnson. Next up on our list, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, who are kind of in the same boat as the Hornets, with a bit more star players, not really, but kind of good players. They had Mike Conley, Zach Randolph, Marc Gasol. Those are their big three back in the days, 2010s. And they made a couple good playoff runs, but they never really won anything. But from the Memphis Grizzlies, I think it really comes down to those three. Man, really is. Ja Morant could get there one day, and I think he will. He's already on that path, so it's not that much of a hill to climb for him, and I think he can get there. But as it stands, I think Marc Gasol is probably the greatest Grizzly of all time. He has a DPOY to his name, although somehow he was third in MVP vote. He was all defensive third team, but still got DPOY, which makes negative sense. But I'll ignore it for now. But I think for the Grizzlies, I'm gonna have to go with Marc Gasol. Next up, we have the Miami Heat, and this is another one of the scenarios where you could argue it's LeBron James, as he was the star of the Miami Heat during their championship days, but I think it is Dwayne Wade, pretty cut and dry. Dwayne Wade is the embodiment of a Heat, stayed there almost his entire career, moved to Chicago, came back, has 3 championships there, 2 with LeBron, 1 on his own, and won a championship in his 3rd year, which is insane, which is like saying Luka would have won a championship the year they played the Warriors, 2022, when the Warriors won. Although, they did have, Dwayne Wade had Shaq, it's a bit better than whatever Luka had, but still a comparison nonetheless. I do think D Wade is the embodiment of the Miami Heat franchise as a whole, as there's even a street in Miami named after Dwayne Wade. So they call it a Wade Street. So, yeah. Next up on our list, we have the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks really have 2 options, Giannis and Kareem. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar obviously has more MVPs, and they both have a championship. Giannis has 2 MVPs and a DPOY. I think for recency bias purposes, I'm going to go with the Giannis here, because although Kareem got them their first championship, Giannis was the one that brought them a championship after that 50-year drought, and not having a championship, which feels a lot more rejuvenating to get a championship out of a drought without just other than getting the first championship, which is debatable. Obviously, you can argue whatever you want, but in my opinion, I think Giannis is the greatest Buck of all time. Next on our list, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves, and this I think is Kevin Garnett. KG was a great player, even better trash talker, but I think the Timberwolves haven't had any championships. Really, only KG won his own championships with the Celtics in 2008, but I do think he is the greatest Timberwolf of all time. Maybe Anthony Edwards could probably pass it up one day. I think he will, but as it stands currently, Kevin Garnett is the greatest Minnesota Timberwolf of all time. Next on our list, we have the New Orleans Pelicans, and I think it's going to be Chris Paul. Back when Chris Paul, DeMarcus Cousins, and Anthony Davis were on that team, they were amazing. Never really did anything with that thing. Although I did make the rule that Chris Paul cannot come up twice, so the Pelicans, I'm going to go with Anthony Davis. A bit of a mental lapse there, that's my bad. So I'm going to go with AD for the Pelicans, in that same era. Chris Paul played there, they were teammates there. Although they didn't really do much with their, extended star power, with DeMarcus Cousins there too. They still were a great team, but they couldn't really, feed off of that. Next up, we got the New York Knicks, and this is, I think, between Walt Frazier and Patrick Ewing. Obviously, Patrick Ewing is a better player, but Frazier does have the championships. 2 of them, actually. But I think Patrick Ewing was, the better player, and I will give him props for that. So I'm going to go Ewing is the greatest Knick of all time. Although, some can, argue that, Frazier is the better franchise player due to his championship. But I think currently it is definitely Patrick Ewing. Next on our list, we got the Oklahoma City Thunder, and this is between, I think, Russell Westbrook, and Kevin Durant. But if we're talking about a franchise GOAT, after how KD did that team by leaving them after they got beaten while being up 3-1 in the playoffs, just leaves to the team that just beat them, was really a snake move. And as I've heard, they've never really made it up to each other, as KD hurt the team that bad by just ditching them completely without no previous warning. So I'm gonna go with Russ is really the 2017 MVP. He really put them back on the map without KD and just made a statement to the league saying, I know we lost KD, but I'm still here. And he really showed them. He won the MVP. Average a triple-double that season was really incredible, to be honest. So I'm going to give that Thunder spot to Russell Westbrook. Next, we have the Magic. I think the Magic is probably between Penny Hardaway and Dwight Howard. I am going to go Dwight Howard from the Magic, though, because strictly off those 3 DPOYs that he has, I think Shaq could also be in this conversation, but he was not there long enough. I believe 6 seasons or so. And although he was great, I don't think he was really, he didn't stay there long enough, so I can't really give him props for that. So for the Magic, I am going to have to go with Dwight Howard. Next on our list, we have the Philadelphia 76ers. And this is one of those things where I think it's between Allen Iverson and Julius Erving. I am going to go Allen Iverson, strictly off aura, because he was, I guess, another anomaly, like Kobe's in the store, where he inspired so many players and a generation of fans. But if we are going off of championships and success, I'm going to go with Julius Erving, who did have success. He beat the Showtime Lakers in that Sixers jersey, so with the Sixers, so I am going to go with Julius Erving. Allen Iverson, but if you want to go off of winning, you can go with Julius Erving. I'm going strictly off aura for this. Next up, we have the Suns, and I think this is pretty clear. It's Steve Nash. You can argue it's Charles Barkley too, who also won an MVP there, but I'm gonna go with Steve Nash because he did have 2 MVPs, and he was the driver for one of the greatest offenses in their era. Although they never really won anything, as did Charles Barkley, who also never won anything. I think Steve Nash's extra MVP really just pushed him over the top against Charles Barkley, so I'm going to go Steve Nash. Next up, we got the Portland Trailblazers, who don't really have a very successful franchise, really, outside of maybe Clyde Drexler. But I think I'm going to go with Damian Lillard. He was one of the best. He was second best point guard in the league at a time, behind Steph, and really was the head of the Portland Trailblazers. Him and CJ McCollum really led that team through a bad team, a bad front office, really everything. Although he hasn't really played that well in Milwaukee this current season, I am going to go with Damian Lillard being the best Trailblazer of all time. Although you could give that respect to a player like Clyde Drexler. So next on, let's say the Sacramento Kings. I think so far it's probably Oscar Robertson, who was another triple-double machine. Robertson, he was a great player, but I think it could also be Chris Webber, you could say. But I think this mantle could be taken up by De'Aaron Fox or even Domantas Sabonis if we can get there someday. So, yeah. Next on our list, we have the San Antonio Spurs, and I think this is pretty cut and dry. It's Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan really led their franchise, 5 championships. He's a great defensive, offensive player. Had that fundamentals down. Tim Duncan was an amazing player in general, and I do think that he is the greatest Spur of all time. He really led their dynasty with Manu, Tony, David Robinson for a couple, and then also Kawhi Leonard for a couple. So Tim Duncan is the greatest Spur of all time. Next on our list, we have the Toronto Raptors. And this is one of those things where it's between Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard obviously did bring them their championship, but he wasn't there for a long while. Kyle Lowry was an essential part in that championship run while also being there for a lot longer. I'm gonna give this to Kyle Lowry strictly off of just being there longer. As if Kawhi was there longer, I would have given it to him without a doubt. He brought them their finals MVP too. But as it stands, Kyle Lowry was an essential part to that championship team, and also was there for there for a long time of his long career. So I'm gonna give it to Kyle Lowry, but you can make a very good argument that it is Kawhi Leonard. Next up for the Jazz, I think it's between either John Stockton and Karl Malone. So you can really give it to either one of them. To be honest, I don't care that much. It's the Jazz, forgettable franchise. Sorry, Jazz fans. But it's one of the two, you know, they've led them to 2 finals appearances where they both lost to Jordan, but, you know, they did what they can. So you can argue either of them. I'm not going to argue for any of them. I'm just going to put like a duo for that one because they really had all their success together. So you can choose either one you want. I don't really care, to be honest. And then finally, we have the Washington Wizards, who are a franchise with little to no All-Stars. But I think it's going to be between Wes Unseld, who was an old player and who was an MVP in his rookie season, by the way, and maybe like Alvin Hayes, who was a great rebounder, and someone else would be Gilbert Arenas. I'm going to give it to Wes Unseld, you know, spec pick. So, you know, not many people know about him, but he was a very good player, won MVP. So I'm going to give the Wizards GOAT to Wes Unseld. That is every NBA team's all-time GOAT. Thank you for watching. If you don't mind, please try watching my other videos. Subscribe, like, do everything. I make videos every week. Sometimes I go on break without warning. You know, you feel free to, I guess, comment on my videos, like, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and until now, see you next time.